I didn't think. I just jumped. The water was freezing, the current was strong, and all I could see was a child going under. I pulled him out, got him breathing, and handed him back to his frantic father on the shore. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd saved a life and could go back to mine, but I didn't know who that boy was. And I didn't know that saving him would destroy everything I'd spent years trying to protect. My name is Claire, and I've spent the last 8 years trying to disappear. I live in a small town called Riverside, tucked into the mountains of northern Washington, where nobody asks too many questions and people mostly keep to themselves. I work at a diner called Maggie's, serving coffee and eggs to the same 15 regulars who come in every morning. I rent a one-bedroom apartment above the hardware store. I don't have social media. I don't have close friends. I don't have anything that ties me to the person I used to be. I left Seattle when I was 23. I'd testified against someone I shouldn't have, and the people he worked for made it clear I wasn't safe anymore. The police offered witness protection, but I turned it down. I didn't want handlers. I didn't want check-ins. I wanted to vanish. So I changed my name, dyed my hair, and moved somewhere no one would think to look. For 8 years, it worked. I kept my head down. I worked my shifts. I hiked alone on weekends. I read books at night and went to bed early. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself, but it was quiet, and quiet meant safe. Then one Sunday afternoon in late September, I went down to the river. There's a spot about 2 miles outside of town where the water runs fast but shallow, and people sometimes bring their kids to skip rocks or wade in during the summer. I liked going there in the fall when it was empty. I'd sit on the bank and watch the water move, and for a little while I'd feel something close to peace. That day, the riverbank wasn't empty. There was a black SUV parked near the trail. Expensive. Out of place. I almost turned around, but I told myself I was being paranoid. It was a public spot. People had a right to be there. I walked down to the water and sat on a flat rock about 20 yards from where a man and a boy were standing. The man was tall, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair and a long coat that looked too formal for a Sunday, by the river. The boy was young, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a bright red jacket. He was throwing stones into the water while the man talked on his phone. I wasn't paying much attention. I was looking at the trees, at the way the light came through the branches. Then I heard a splash. I looked up and saw the boy was gone. The man was still on the phone, his back turned. He hadn't noticed. I stood up fast and scanned the water. The current had pulled the boy downstream, and I saw his red jacket surface for a second before it went under again. I didn't think. I ran. I hit the water hard, and the cold knocked the air out of my lungs. The current was stronger than it looked, and I had to fight to stay upright. I pushed toward where I'd seen him go under, and then I saw his hand break the surface. I grabbed his jacket and pulled him up. His face was pale, his eyes wide with terror, and he wasn't breathing. I dragged him to the shore, laid him on his back, and started CPR. 2 breaths. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. I kept going until he coughed, and water came up. He gasped and started crying, and I rolled him onto his side and told him he was okay. That's when the man reached us. He dropped to his knees next to the boy, pulled him into his arms, and said something in a language I didn't understand. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were dark and sharp, and there was something in his expression I couldn't read. Relief. Gratitude, and something else. He asked me my name. I hesitated. Then I said, "Claire." He nodded slowly, still holding his son. He said, "Thank you." I told him the boy needed to see a doctor. He said he'd take care of it. Then he stood, lifted his son, and walked back to the SUV without another word. I stood there, soaking wet and shivering, and watched them drive away. I thought that was the end of it. 2 days later, a man came into the diner. He was younger than the father by the river, maybe early 30s, wearing a suit that didn't belong in a town like Riverside. He sat down at the counter and ordered coffee. I poured it, set it down, and turned to walk away. He said my name. I froze. He said it again. Not the name I'd been using. My real name. The one I hadn't heard in 8 years. I looked at him and my stomach dropped. He smiled, but it wasn't friendly. He said his employer wanted to thank me for saving his son. He said I'd done a brave thing. He said they were grateful. I told him I didn't want anything. I told him to leave. He didn't move. He took a sip of his coffee and said they'd looked into me. He said they knew who I was. He said they knew where I'd come from. He said they knew why I'd disappeared. I felt the room tilt. He stood up, left a $100 bill on the counter, and told me someone would be in touch. Then he walked out. Quit my shift early. I went back to my apartment, locked the door, and tried to think. They knew who I was. That meant they could find the people I'd testified against. That meant they could tell them where I was. I thought about running again, packing a bag and leaving that night. But I'd been running for 8 years and I was tired. And part of me didn't believe they'd actually do anything. Maybe it was just a message. Maybe they just wanted me to know they could reach me if they wanted to. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a florist delivered 24 white roses to the diner. The card said, "You have our gratitude. Vincent." Vincent. The father by the river. Maggie, the owner, asked who they were from. I told her I didn't know. I threw the card away and left the flowers in the back. That afternoon, the same man from before came back. This time, he didn't sit down. He handed me an envelope and told me it was a gift. I didn't open it. I told him I didn't want his money. He said it wasn't money. He said it was information. I opened it. Inside was a printed photo. It was taken outside a courthouse in Seattle. It showed me, 8 years younger, walking down the steps. And standing across the street watching was a man I recognized. One of the men I'd helped put away. The note beneath the photo said, "He was released 6 months ago." I looked up at the man in the suit. I asked him what he wanted. He said Vincent wanted to meet with me. He said it was just a conversation. He said I could say no, but that saying no would mean they couldn't help me anymore. I asked what that meant. He smiled again. He said, "It means you'll be on your own." I met Vincent 2 days later. He chose a cabin outside of town, private, isolated. When I arrived, the same man in the suit was standing outside. He opened the door and led me in. Vincent was sitting at a table by the window. His son wasn't with him. He stood when I entered, gestured to a chair, and thanked me for coming. I didn't sit. I asked him what he wanted. He said he wanted to repay me. He said saving his son meant everything to him and he didn't take debts lightly. He said he'd looked into my situation and he understood why I was hiding. He said he could protect me. I told him I didn't need protection. He nodded slowly. Then he slid a folder across the table. Inside were more photos. The man from the courthouse. Surveillance shots of him in Seattle, getting into a car, walking into a building. And then, one photo that made my blood run cold. It was taken 3 days ago, in Riverside, outside Maggie's diner. Vincent said the man was looking for me. He said it was only a matter of time before he found me. He said if I let him, he could make the problem go away. I asked him what he meant by that. He didn't answer, directly. He just said, "People like him don't stop. But people like me can make sure they do." I felt sick. I told him I didn't want anyone killed. I told him I just wanted to be left alone. Vincent leaned back in his chair. He said that wasn't how the world worked. He said I'd saved his son, and now he owed me. He said debts had to be paid. He said whether I accepted his help or not, he would make sure I was safe. I stood up. I told him I didn't want any part of this. I told him to stay away from me. He didn't try to stop me. He just said, You can't run from this, Claire, not anymore. I left. 2 days later, the man from the courthouse was found dead in a motel room 40 miles outside of Riverside. The news said it was a drug overdose, no foul play. Suspected I knew better. I went to the police. I told them everything. I told them about Vincent, about the meeting, about the threats. I gave them names, descriptions, everything I could remember. The detective listened. Then he made a phone call, and when he hung up, his face had changed. He told me there was no evidence of coercion. He told me the man who died had a history of substance abuse. He told me I should be grateful someone had been looking out for me. I realized then that Vincent's reach went further than I'd thought. I left the station and went back to my apartment. That night, the man in the suit came to my door. He handed me another envelope. Inside was a one-way ticket to a city I'd never been to, a new ID, and a note. It said, "The debt is paid. Don't come back." They'd erased me again, but this time it wasn't my choice. I'm writing this from a town I won't name, in a state I've never lived in before. I have a new name, a new job, a new apartment. Everything is new, except for the feeling that I'm not really here. I don't go to the river anymore. I don't go anywhere. That feels too open or too quiet. I keep my phone on me at all times, and I check over my shoulder more than I used to. I saved a child's life, and I'd do it again. But I didn't know that saving him would mean losing myself. Vincent kept his word. I'm safe from the man who was looking for me. But I'm not safe from the life Vincent pulled me into. Because now I'm connected to him. Now I'm someone who owes a debt, whether I wanted to or not. And people like Vincent don't forget. I don't sleep well anymore. I lie awake and think about the man in the motel room. I think about whether he would have found me if I'd done nothing. I think about whether I could have said no to Vincent and survived. I don't have answers. The diner I work at now is smaller than Maggie's. The people are different, but every time the door opens, I look up, half expecting to see the man in the suit. Every time my phone rings, I wonder if it's Vincent calling in another favor. I thought disappearing would give me my life back. But you can't disappear from people who've decided you matter. I'm alive, I'm hidden, but I'm not free, and I don't think I ever will be again. Some acts of courage don't end when the danger passes. I thought saving a life would be simple. Do the right thing and walk away. But the right thing tied me to people I never should have known. I should have understood that gratitude in the wrong hands is just another kind of cage.